One man survived a train crash into a frozen river, a plane he was thrown out of, a bus that went into a river, two cars that burst into flames, a city bus that ran him down, and a car that fell off a mountain. 7 times, death reached for him. 7 times it missed. And then, at 73 years old, he bought a single lottery ticket and won a fortune. His name was Frane Selak, and the world called him both the luckiest and the unluckiest man alive. Let's talk about Frane Selak for a second, because his life reads like a list of ways a person should already be dead. He was born in 1929 in Croatia, in what was then Yugoslavia. He grew up to become a music teacher, a quiet, ordinary profession. He was not a soldier, not a stuntman, not a daredevil. He taught music. He liked simple things. There was nothing about him that should have put him in the path of disaster again and again for the next 40 years. If you had met him on the street, you would have walked right past him. An average man, in average clothes, living an average life in a small corner of Europe. That is what makes his story so strange. Disaster doesn't usually hunt the quiet ones. But here's what almost nobody knows about how it started. The strange run of his life didn't begin with anything dramatic. It began in the dead of winter on a train in January of 1962. Frane was riding a train traveling along a route toward Dubrovnik. The weather was brutal, snow, ice, and a bitter cold that turned the rivers along the track to slush. And on one stretch of line, beside a river, the train left the rails. It plunged off the track and into an icy, freezing river. Carriages filled with frigid water in seconds. People were trapped inside as the cold poured in. 17 passengers died in that crash. Frane found himself thrown into the river in the freezing dark, with a broken arm and the breath knocked out of him. He fought his way out of the water, swam to the bank, and survived, dragged to shore, hypothermic and bleeding, but alive. And here is the part people forget. Surviving the crash was only half of it. In water that cold, many who lived through the impact did not live through the freeze that came after. Frane was one of the very few who made it out at all. Most people go their entire lives without a single moment like that. For Frane Selak, it was only the first. The following year, in 1963, something happened that is so strange even Frane admitted it sounded impossible. By his own account, he was on a plane, flying for the first and only time in his life, when a door tore open in midair. And in the rushing chaos of wind and pressure, Frane was pulled clean out of the aircraft. The plane went down. 19 people on board were killed. And here's the part that doesn't feel real. Frane landed in a haystack. He survived the fall, while the plane he had just been ripped out of crashed without him. Whether every detail of that story is exact, historians have argued for years. Some of it may have grown taller in the retelling. But true, exaggerated, or somewhere in between, it became the legend that followed him for the rest of his life. The man who fell out of the sky and walked away from it. And the disasters kept coming. In 1966, Frane was on a bus. The roads were wet, the bus skidded, left the road, and went down into a river. For passengers drowned, Frane swam out of the sinking bus, reached the shore, and lived, with only cuts and bruises to show for it. 3 times now, water had tried to take him. A frozen river, a falling plane, a sinking bus. And 3 times, he had simply climbed back out and gone on with his life, as if disaster were just bad weather he had learned to expect. By now, you might think the universe had run out of ways to kill this man. It had not. And in his hometown, people had begun to talk. Word spread about the quiet music teacher who kept walking away from disasters that killed everyone around him. Some whispered that he was cursed. Others swore he was the most blessed man in the whole country. Frane never claimed to understand it himself. He only knew that, time after time, he was the one still breathing when it was over. He had stopped trusting trains. He had stopped trusting planes and buses. And still, somehow, he got up the next morning and went on living an ordinary life. So the universe stopped using water. It turned to fire. In 1970, Frane was driving when his car suddenly caught fire. Flames were spreading through the vehicle while he was still inside it, with a full fuel tank beneath him. He managed to pull over and scramble out the door. Moments later, the fuel tank blew. He got clear just before the explosion, close enough to feel the heat of it roll across his back. 3 years later, the fire came for him again. In 1973, a faulty fuel pump sprayed petrol all over the hot engine of another car he was driving. The fumes caught, and flames came roaring up through the air vents, straight into the cabin around him. He fought his way out of the burning car alive, though the fire took most of his hair before he made it. And the strangest thing is how ordinary the next one was. In 1995, walking through the city of Zagreb, Frane was struck by a city bus. After surviving a frozen river, a falling plane, a sinking bus, and 2 fires, he was knocked down in traffic on an ordinary afternoon. He picked himself up with only minor injuries, bruised but standing. And then came the one that should have been the end. In 1996, Frane was driving on a mountain road when a truck came around a curve straight toward him in his lane. To avoid a head-on collision, he wrenched the wheel as hard as he could. His car smashed through the guardrail and went off the edge of the mountain, a long, steep drop down the slope. But as the car went over, Frane was thrown free of it, and his hands caught hold of a tree. He hung there on the side of the mountain and watched his own car tumble more than 90 meters below him and burst into flames as it slammed into the bottom. 7 times now, by the count the world would give him, death had come for Frane Selak. 7 times, it had walked away empty-handed. And then his luck did something nobody expected. In 2003, at 73 years old, Frane did something he almost never did. He bought a lottery ticket. He had spent a lifetime as the man disaster could not kill. He had cheated a train, a plane, a bus, 2 fires, a city street, and a mountain. He had buried the idea that the odds could ever be on his side. And now, with a single cheap ticket, the other half of his luck finally showed its face. He won. The jackpot came to roughly $1 million. The unluckiest man alive, the man who kept surviving the things that killed everyone around him, became, in one afternoon, a millionaire. And what he did with the money tells you exactly who he was. Frane didn't lock the fortune away or change into someone new. He bought a home. He helped the people he loved. And over the years that followed, he gave most of the money away to family and friends. He married, and he said it again and again to anyone who asked. His real luck had never been the money. It had never been the haystack or the tree or the riverbank. His real luck, he said, was the people he loved and simply being alive to love them. In the end, the man who survived 7 disasters reportedly gave away nearly everything the lottery had handed him and chose to live quietly and simply. Frane Selak died in 2016 at the age of 87, peacefully of old age in his own bed. After a lifetime of trains, planes, fire, and the mountain, that is how it finally ended. And historians and statisticians have puzzled over him ever since. Was Frane Selak the unluckiest man who ever lived, standing in the path of one disaster after another? Or was he the luckiest, because not one of them could ever finish the job? The honest answer is that he was both, at the exact same time, a man the odds kept choosing and kept failing to claim. 7 times death reached for him, and 7 times it missed. And the one time luck came to him gently, it handed him a fortune. That's real. If this story surprised you, the like button is right there. And if you want more stories that should be fiction but aren't, there's a new one here every couple of days. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next.